Hey there, Christophe from the French Herbal in the beautiful Swiss Alps for this episode, and welcome to this Q&A on medicinal plants and herbalism. I've been very active on the French speaking side since 2010, and over the years I've received many questions on herbs and how to use them. So my team and I, we've done our best to answer those questions as they come, and once in a while I select the most interesting questions and I do a Q&A. And well, this is the first one I do in English, so if you like it, let me know and I will do this for you on a reoccurring basis. We will start slow with this first Q&A and we'll try to cover some of the basics of herbs. So today I've selected 3 questions. The first one is, can you eat directly medicinal plants? The second one is, what's the difference between a herbal tea and a hydrosol? You know, 2 preparations using water to extract constituents. And number 3, are there bad plant combinations for making a tea blend? Okay, so let's move right in. The first question, for internal use, why do you always recommend a tea or a tincture? Why not just chew the leaves or other parts of the plants and then swallow? And I don't know why the French always ask this type of question, probably because we like to eat anything that moves and that doesn't move. So first of all, let us realize that if our ancestors started to prepare different brews like infusions and decoctions, there is a reason. You know, our ancestors were very practical and pragmatic, so never adding unnecessary steps. So why did they start to infuse the plants in water and later in alcohol and oil and other type of menstruums? Well, because taking advantage of medicinal plants will depend on how breakable and digestible they are, right? If the plant is fresh, juicy and tender, you can chew it and you can swallow it. You know, for instance, if I take a fresh, juicy burdock root, I can chew and swallow, no problem. And I'm not talking about the big central root that is super fibrous at the end of the second year, but the smaller roots, you know, of the first year plant that are very, very good and tender. Same with fresh peppermint leaves, or maybe a very tender flower like a fresh mallow or marshmallow flower. You know, sure, no problem. I can chew, I can swallow. But here's the problem. Most of the time, it's not really possible. First of all, most of us work with dried plants from the shop or from the pantry. And try chewing dried dandelion roots or dried verbena leaves or dried linden flowers. You know, it's unpleasant, it's scratchy, and you could even choke. That's why we usually do an extraction first, a tea, a tincture, infused oil, etc. We work around the fibrous, irritating material by letting the water or the oil or the alcohol go get the constituents for us, so that we can then absorb them, you know, with the liquid. Although sometimes we use one big trick for dried fibrous plant parts. We grind them into a fine powder and then we mix the powder into something we can ingest, right? Applesauce or a soup, or maybe we integrate the powder into liquid honey or other type of food that accepts the powder. Or maybe we put it in a capsule. And the act of grinding, of powdering the dried plant material will break the fiber, right? And allow our digestive juices to do the extraction once in the gut. If the plant tolerates the powdering process, of course. No, let's take an example. You cannot chew on dried ashwagandha roots, but you can powder the roots and add the powder to your applesauce, for instance. The gut will do the rest, you know, it will work just fine. But powdering very aromatic plants like oregano or rosemary or holy basil leaves or valerian roots or tons of other plants is not a good idea, because you will lose a lot of those precious essential oil. You know, when you do the grinding, it smells nice. It means that the volatile constituents are getting to your nose and they're not in the plant anymore. And I know it is often done by some capsule makers Some people grind those plants, but it's kind of a shame, right? And I'm not talking about concentrated and standardized dried plant extract, which is technically also a powder put in capsule, but the concentrated extract is a different form, and I will explain the difference one of these days. Here I'm talking about the raw plant part reduced into a powder. Again, not a good idea for some aromatic and fragile plants. At this point, sometimes the person will ask this type of question like, yeah, but what if you're stuck in the wild and you don't have a pan or anything else to hold your water and do your brew? Okay, so yes, if you were stuck in the wild and you had a gut infection, for instance, then sure, you could chew on some antibacterial plants like maybe thyme if you live in my region, in the south of France, or monarda or Oregon grape root or whatever is around you, right? It's unpleasant, but if you're stuck with nothing else, then that will do. For home-based herbalism though, you cannot just open a bag of goldenrod leaves and chew on them. I mean, technically you can, but it's not a memorable experience and compliance will be poor. You can do that over and over, throughout the days and the weeks. Okay, so I hope I clarified this. We can move on to the next question. The next one is about distillation versus infusion. They're both water-based extractions. So what's the difference? An infusion is a direct-based extraction. You pour boiling water over the plant and you let it steep, and this will pull both light and heavy water-soluble molecules. It's quite good at pulling water-soluble molecule, whatever their size in terms of molecular weight. Now, a hydrosol is made by steam distillation in a still, and steam passes through the plant carrying only the light molecules, right? So at the end of the still, it will condense into a liquid, the hydrosol. I mean, you can distill to get the essential oil and the hydrosol, or you can just distill to get the hydrosol. If your goal is to get the essential oil, in other words, to maximize the yield of essential oil while also collecting the hydrosol, then the hydrosol will be less rich. It will be very light in aroma and in taste. Now, if you distill just to get the hydrosol, then that's another story. The hydrosol will be fuller, it will be more intense, more aromatic. And between two hydrosols distilled following two different type of process, there can be a huge difference. Some are very disappointing and some are very incredibly rich. So know your producers and know what method they use and try their hydrosol. Compare with others and you will be surprised about the difference. But back to the question. Sorry for the tangent. Back to the question. Heavy molecules like mucilage, tannins, certain glycosides, and alkaloids are not carried over by the steam. I repeat, they will not be carried over, therefore they will not end up in the hydrosol. But you do get them in an infusion. That is why a herbal tea is often seen as a more complete preparation. It represents more of the plant's full profile, right? That said, hydrosols are still super valuable. They were once considered just a distillation byproduct, right? Just to throw away. But today we use them. They're convenient to use. They keep some of the properties of the plant. Sometimes they keep most of its properties, sometimes not. And they're lighter, more subtle. They're very pleasant to take, very easy to add to a glass of water, usually around a tablespoon, but that will also depend on the plant. And something super convenient as well, you can keep them for months, usually in the fridge to be safe, right? And remember that for a herbal tea, you keep them for 24 hours or maybe 48 hours max in the fridge, because they will start to ferment, right? And the bacteria, they love the complex sugar and mucilage that the tea will extract. And since the hydrosol does not contain those heavy sugars, they ferment a lot less. I mean, they will end up fermenting and turning bad, but after a much, much longer time. So, in short, two different expressions of the plant. Hydrosol, convenient, ready to use, easy to measure, and they keep well. Herbal teas, they offer more variety in constituents, including mucilage, tannin, glycosides, and alkaloids, but they will keep a lot less. So it's not this or that, it's this and that. We can have both forms in our pharmacies. Okay, our next question is about combining different plants in a blend, in a tea blend. Are there combination of plants you should avoid when making a tea blend? And here we're talking about the blend itself, not the person taking it, because the person will bring its own constitution and problematic and will make things a lot more complicated, right? So a tea blend might be badly formulated for that person, for that constitution. But for our discussion, we're trying to think just in the cup. Are there plants independent of the person and his or her condition? Are there plants that we should not combine? Well, if you're just starting your practice, I'd say don't overthink it. Experiment, mix some common plants, well-known plants with a long history of use, follow good reference books that give you already some classic blends, try them out, then modify them to your needs and see how you react to those blends, whatever your situation is. That being said, if we want to be picky, less than ideal mixes do exist, and you can organize your reflection using different axes. The first one is the constituent axis. A very tannic plant like oak bark can reduce the absorption of certain constituents of other plants by binding to the mucosa and making absorption much harder. In a similar fashion, mucilage-rich plants can trap and carry away some of the active compounds of plants before they're absorbed by the gut mucosa. So if you need something very tannic or something very mucilaginous, maybe you isolate them from the other plants you want to use. Don't put it in the same blend. Maybe you take your very tannic plants or your very mucilaginous plants separately, and then you take the other plants at another moment of the day. That being said, if they constitute a smaller portion of your blend, don't worry too much about it, right? Don't overthink it. It's been done for centuries. A bit of mallow flowers in your tea blend to add some soothing effect, or a bit of agrimony to bring a bit of astringency to your mix, then don't worry about it, right? Again, if you look at the tea blends through centuries, it's been well accepted in practice. But again, very, very tannic preparations, very, very mucilaginous preparation, like marshmallow root, cold infusion, then separate them from the other plants, ideally. Okay. Another incompatible mix that is often mentioned in the old pharmacy books is the mix of a very tannic plant with alkaloid-rich plants, because tannins are acids, alkaloids are bases, and acid plus base leads to salt. And that salt will deposit if you let the liquid sit for long enough, right? In a tincture that will sit for years, you may start to see a deposit at the bottom of the jar. In a tea, in your cup, well, most of the time nothing will be visible. But some binding will happen very rapidly in the liquid as well. It will remain kind of floating in the tea, invisible to the eyes, and some salt will be poorly absorbed, right? The association of tannins with quinine, for instance, the very bitter constituent from the cinchona tree, will not be absorbed well. We know that. Other salts, I don't really know. So making a tea of oak bark powder plus Oregon grape root powder, for instance, with berberine, which is an alkaloid, probably not a good idea. Or geranium herb Robert with California poppy that has lots of alkaloids, probably not a good idea. Although, you know, at some point we really don't know the real practical impact on the efficacy of the blend. So, you know, again, don't let this prevent you from experimenting. If you use tannic plants with alkaloid plants in a smaller proportion in your tea blend, it should be okay. Next axis for our reflection, we could think of incompatibility by actions and energetics if you use that model. For instance, simply based on actions, some plants may work in opposition. So combining a caffeine-rich stimulant plant like kola nut or guarana with a very calming plant like lemon balm, well, that might not be a good idea unless you have a specific reason for doing so. You know, maybe you want to do that for a reason, but at first sight, it makes you wonder, right? Or maybe stimulating the production of gastric acid with gentian or other bitter herbs and mixing that with a herb high in calcium carbonate, which will buffer acid production, maybe not a good idea unless there's a good reason. Or stimulating the thyroid function with seaweed rich in iodine and calming the thyroid with lycopus in your blend. You know, maybe not a good idea. But you know, overall, if you're a beginner, don't let this dissuade you from starting your practice. You know, I think overall, it's kind of hard to really mess up a herbal mix. I mean, sure, some mixes are not very elegant. You know, some plants may clash in their action, and probably you want to be perfect at the beginning, but you will make mistakes. You know, things won't be perfect. Things won't always be elegant and nicely balanced in actions, constituents, and energetics, and that's okay. You know, that is how you will learn. So just don't overthink it too much. Get started with common herbs, safe herbs. Don't play too much with the big guns at the beginning. You know, play with the safe and gentle herbs, experiment, and let the experience feed your learning. You know, you will spot the bad mixes later as you grow, but give yourself some time. And later, you will look at a list of plants and think, oh yeah, I like this mix. And you can almost taste the blend just by reading the list of plants. And sometimes you'll read the list and you'll think, well, I don't know about that mix. I don't like the idea, right? Don't rush it. Some of us have been doing this for decades and we're still feeling like beginners, right? And once in a while, we still mess up. So, which is good if you want to know my opinion. I never want to feel like an expert. You know, the expert has convictions. The beginner is open to everything, including being wrong and making mistakes. And me today, heck, I have less and less convictions, you know. If you've been practicing as a clinical herbalist, you know how hard the practice is. You know that sometimes we work for months and we cannot be of much value to our clients. So complicated their situation is. And then sometimes we're of tremendous help and things will improve super quickly. It's a bit unpredictable, it's a bit of a mess, and it's a beautiful mess. So let's welcome all of it. We do our best, we stay open, we keep growing, we ask for advice. And in another 20 years, maybe we'll have this feeling that we're just starting to grasp at some small pieces of the herbal practice. Just maybe. Okay friends, that's it for this Q&A. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know and I'll see you soon for another episode of The French Herbal.